All right, students, so today we're going to talk all about copyright and copyright law. To get us started, we've got a couple of vocabulary terms that I will be using throughout this presentation that will help you understand what I am talking about. First thing is copyright law. These are laws that are in place for the protection of a person's intellectual property. Copyright infringement is the breaking of copyright law, whether it happens on purpose or not. Intellectual property is any item in any medium that is created by and belongs to an individual. A medium is any type of format that something is created in, just like a video, writing, music, etc. So if you take a poem that you've thought of in your head and you write it down, that would be your intellectual property written in a medium that is protected by copyright law. These three terms are more specific terms that deal with copyright laws and what they're kind of like subcategories of copyright law. Public domain is anything before the year 1923 that copyright no longer protects and is free for anyone to use. Free use is an exception to the copyright law of 1976 that allows for certain individuals to have more access to copyright protected material. But it does have 4 additional criteria that need to be met. We're going to talk about those in a little bit. They are purpose, nature, amount, and effect. The last term that we have for vocabulary is Creative Commons. This is a category within the copyright laws that allow for specific use but require a license to do so. So, what is copyright? Copyright is the protection of a person or persons' work that they've created. As soon as it is written down or produced in a format that is protected by copyright law, whether it has the symbol or not. The example I gave earlier, you write down a poem that is protected by copyright law, whether it has this symbol on it or not. As we showed looking at our vocabulary, there are several different types of copyright. First vocabulary that we're going to talk about is public domain. Anything that is classified as public domain is free and available for anyone to use at any time without having special permission. Several examples of things that are public domain: government and federal documentation, news information, also considered public domain. Anything that is published before the year 1923 is considered public domain. And anything that copyright has expired on. While this is a way of protecting a person's intellectual property, copyright does have specific expiration dates that we will talk about later. The second type of copyright that we're going to talk about is fair use. This is the one that applies mainly to what you will be doing with your assignment. Now, fair use is the biggest exception to copyright law, but it has several rules of its own that need to be followed to avoid what we called copyright infringement. And remember, that's where you're taking someone's work and claiming it as yours, which is illegal. So if you are breaking copyright law, that would be copyright infringement. Fair use has 4 main rules: the purpose of the use, the nature of the use, the amount of that you use of the product, and the effect that it has on the original product's market. Let's take a further look at fair use. It is often what allows us as students and teachers to access and use materials that we have at school, but the rules still apply to us. So here's an example to help you decide if something is fair use. You can walk through this example when you are looking at your material to see if what you want to use is considered fair use. So let's say that you want to use one verse of a poem for a school project. The purpose of this would be to use it in a school project, which would be covered under fair use. The nature is that it is for educational purposes only, which means that it is covered under fair use. The amount, you are only asking to use one verse of an entire poem. The smaller amount that you use, the more ability it is more likely that it is to be covered under fair use. So right now, 3 of the 4 were good, it's still considered fair use. Fourth would be the effect. Since you're using it for a school project, you are not going to sell it, so it is not going to harm the original's market, which means that if in this scenario, you would be able to use this under the terms of fair use. Now, the additional part of fair use is that it must be adding value to the product that you use, and you have to use it in your own way to make it new. It's always a great idea to give credit to the author. It's a sign of respect. If you made a drawing and your friend showed your drawing to somebody else and claimed it as theirs, you would be pretty hurt, right? So by giving credit, you are saying, this is not my work. I am using it for this purpose. This is what I've added to it, and it will help you avoid plagiarism, which will get you in trouble here at school. The third type of copyright that we're going to talk about is Creative Commons. This is another option that operates within copyright law, and it gives you the ability to purchase a license to use a specific product within the terms of that license, because there's many types of license. So let's say that you find an image that is marked with this symbol, meaning Creative Commons. You would ask the author or copyright holder if you can use it for a specific purpose, and then you will purchase a license or a number of licenses that you can use that product for within the means of the contract, of the license that you bought. If you break those or go outside of the terms in your contract, then that would be an example of copyright infringement. While it may not seem like it's a big deal if you break copyright law or choose not to follow it, there are some big penalties if you do. You can be fined $750,000 to $250,000 per offense, and possibly up to 5 years in jail. Meaning if you copyright something, if you break copyright law on one object, and then you do it on a second object, you could be fined $750,000 to $250,000 each time. Now, the jail and the $250,000 offense are going to be closer to the more extreme versions of copyright infringement, and it's going to be if it's proven that you did it on purpose, what is called willful infringement. So let's say that you have a VHS tape that you own and you choose to convert it to a DVD. This would be an example of something that is illegal and goes against copyright law. Remember, it's basically stealing of somebody else's ideas and work. If you are taking the idea and you are making money off of it, that is what's going to get you in trouble. When in doubt, always ask the author and copyright manager for permission to use their work. When you do, it is very important that you are clear and give specifics on what you want to use that belongs to them, how much of the product that you want to use, and why you want to use it. The clearer you can be, the easier it will be to get permission. Know that there is possibly going to be a fee for some of the stuff that you choose to use if the author requests it. And again, like I said, it's always a good idea to give credit to the author anyway. Now, we talked about the fact that copyright has an expiration date. So just how long does copyright last? Just like there's many forms of accessing material that is protected by copyright, there are different lengths of copyright protection varying on the material and publication. So let's say that you, which is a single person, create a drawing, and it is copyrighted. When it is put in the medium, it is protected by copyright law. So your drawing is protected for your entire life and 70 years after your death. Okay? Let's say that you create the drawing because the business that you work for told you to. That would mean that you have 100 years after the creation of your product, or 75 years from when it is publicized, whichever comes first. Dealing with a business has a little bit different rules than just a single person's copyright protection. Let's say you and a friend make a drawing together. This means that you have co-ownership of the product unless one of you says that you are the sole person that has copyright protection over it, then it would go under your first one. But if you co-own it, the last of you that is living, it goes through their life and 70 years after their death, just like the single person. If the work was created prior to 1978, which is when they made the amendment for fair use, you have 28 years of copyright protection, but you can renew the license up to 75 years from when it is originally publicized. So, quick little review before we move on. Copyright protects a person's intellectual property in any medium, whether it has the copyright sign on it or not, once it is put down. Public domain is free for anyone to use at any time. Fair use has 4 main parts to determine: its purpose, nature, amount, and effect. Creative Commons allows for you to purchase a license and use a product within a specific term. It's always a good idea to cite the author, and you need to be as detailed as possible when you ask permission to use their product. And copyright infringement is no joke, and there is a hefty price and possible jail time if it's proven that you did it willfully. I know there's a lot of rules that come with copyright, so it can be a little confusing. We're going to do a quick little review on this before we move on. Here are the sources that I used to help make sure that I understood what was going on before I went with you and to clarify. It's always a good idea to put your sources just like we've talked about, so you're showing that this is how you got your information. Hopefully you better understand copyright.